All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Student Dream TV. I'm your host, Nina Uguomo, bringing you the best money, investing, and startup tips so that you can secure the bag before and after graduation. And as we continue our keynote series, I'm really excited to interview just an advocate, a friend, an entrepreneur, investor, operator, technologist with over 20 years of experience working with entrepreneurs. Her name is Nicole Glaros. And she's just going to talk to us, from her perspective in that space on just how you can be thinking through navigating this crisis and after quarantine with just the power of entrepreneurship and forward thinking. And so if that's something you're interested in, keep listening. All right. Welcome back again. Thank you, Nicole, so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. So I briefly introduced the world to you, but can you quickly just tell us, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Sure. My name is Nicole Glaros. I started my career, actually, I started my first company when I was in college. Nice. And started a total of 3 companies. And ever since then, I've been in love with entrepreneurship and have been working to support entrepreneurs, helping them be the best versions of themselves, helping their companies be more successful. So I'm this funny blend of entrepreneur and operator and investor and probably startup therapist.
I love it. We need some of that right now. So that is good. We need some therapy. So I think it's so important to realize that, careers don't just happen in 2 years, 3 years. And it'd be so great to hear, how did you end up, having all that experience? Can you quickly kind of share a bit about your journey?
Yeah, I can. Actually, I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, but I'm second generation American. So my grandparents were born overseas, and my mother is a very strong female who at a young age taught me to never rely on anybody else for income. And my father, as an entrepreneur, always made his own income. And so those 2 concepts combined for me at a very early age in wanting to be in charge of my own financial destiny. I think when I was in college, I was getting a master's degree, and I sat down one day and realized how long it was going to take me to pay off my student loans. And that just didn't feel like financial freedom to me. When I was looking at the jobs that were available to me and the traditional paths that my friends were taking, I just thought, I don't want to be in that boat. I don't want to take 40 years to pay off my student loans. Right. I want to be in charge of my future sooner. And so I started a company when I was in college. And the goal of it was literally to pay off my student debt, get out of debt quickly so I can be in charge of my future. And I kind of never looked back from there, right? I've been an entrepreneur and supporting entrepreneurs and an investor ever since. And really understanding how to think about money and how to think about my own future and my own career path in order that I can be in charge of my own destiny instead of somebody else being in charge of it.
Yeah. And can you tell me more about that college startup? Because I think we have a lot of college students listening who, they've worked the retail jobs, they've worked the fast food jobs, they've seen Shark Tank, and they're like, man, this may be something cool to do, but I don't know if this is really for me. And so I'd love to hear more about your story and on how you built something while in college.
Yeah, sure. And what I could tell you is that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. If you think that it's easy, it's not. It's very, very hard. There are no manuals. There is no anybody like leaning over your shoulder, making sure that you're doing right, or forcing you to do something that you don't want to do, because there's a lot of parts of entrepreneurship you don't want to do. Really true.
Say that.
But I think what happened for me is I mentioned this. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and when I was in college and I was looking at my student bills, and at the time I was waiting tables and I was working in a gym, and I was making single-digit dollars per hour, and there was just no way I was going to ever get out of debt. And so I had said to my dad, I'm interested in starting a company, but I don't know what to do. And he said, I got an idea for you. And I kind of ran with his idea because I didn't know anything else to do.
Wow.
And it turned out that that idea was not a bad one. In fact, the business was called propertymanagementshop.com, and we created an online retailer for the property management industry. Think like selling bike racks and parking decals and things like that, that like apartment complexes would need.
Right.
But this was in 1998 when the web was just coming online. And one of the things that we needed was a way to sell products online. And at the time, e-commerce wasn't even a word.
Wow.
And so we ended up creating one of the first internet e-commerce engines. It was very rudimentary. Like, we were breaking all kinds of rules. I was literally collecting credit card numbers in emails. Emails were getting printed out with credit card numbers. We would then walk over to a phone and call the credit card processor with it was
wow.
very, very hokey. But this is how you learn, right? And at the time, I was financing the business all through cash advances from my credit cards, which
wow.
I don't
That's a high risk.
Yeah, I don't recommend you doing. But of course, when you're in your 20s, you're young and dumb and don't know any better. And sometimes that's a strength, and sometimes that's a weakness. But that's how I got started. And I'll tell you, the two companies that I did after that were not as successful as the first one. And that was where I really learned my lesson on what market demand means and how to build a product or a service that the market is willing to pay for. The first time, I think I just stumbled into it.
Yeah.
I had the guidance from my father, who had been running businesses for a long time. So I think you have an advantage. You have an advantage when you're in your 20s, right? Which is you don't know any better. And when you don't know any better, and also when you have nothing, I always tell people the power of zero is the most powerful place you can ever be, because when you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. And if you don't have a big bank account and you don't have a lot of resources, you're not going to lose any if you're wrong. And so while you're young, the time to do this is now. It's the best time to do it is when you're in college. But like I said, it's not, entrepreneurship really isn't for everyone. So I don't wish that path on most. But for those that just don't fit into the standard mold, it can be a really great path. You are in charge of your own destiny. You're also a slave to it.
Yeah.
But you can be in charge of yourself rather than anything else, which is a nice feature.
Yeah. That's so helpful. You mentioned a lot of things there too, Nicole. You talk about just that you had that guidance from your dad, right? Who had that perspective as an entrepreneur to be able to say, hey, I got an idea for you. And you mentioned that you kind of were doing e-commerce when e-commerce wasn't even a word. And then you learned about market demand. And so, even though some of us listening, we may or may not have that guidance from our parents, right? But we do have Nicole right now. And so we're just going to talk to Auntie Nicole real quick. Yeah. Big sister Nicole. Okay.
I'm here to help.
Right. So big sis Nicole, what are some ideas that you have for us, right? As the college students listening, right? Who may be like, man, I want to have control over my financial destiny, but I may not have an idea. Is there like some career advice you can give us in terms of, here's some market opportunities to be looking at right now?
Well, the thing that I would say, and I tell all entrepreneurs this, right, is find something that you're passionate about, because again, the path of entrepreneurship is not hard. In fact, it's probably the hardest thing that you will ever do. It is way harder than going out and getting a job. It is way harder than working for someone else.
Yeah.
And you will fail multiple times in the attempt to pursue this topic. So if you don't love it, you will fail permanently, because you're just, when it gets really hard, you're going to walk away from it. You have to find something that you can't, and I mean can't, walk away from, because your heart is so wrapped into it. And that was a mistake that I made early. And I would say early, I was just lucky.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? And I wouldn't wish that path on anyone else. That first company that I did was really just an education for me. And it was a good one, and the second and third ones that didn't work were much better educations, because I learned way more. You learn more about what not to do when it's not working. and
Right.
learn about what to do when it is working. So I would say first thing is figure out what you're passionate about. And if you're not sure what that is, I have a good test for you. Come up with a topic that you could read 100 books on and not bat an eye. You go to the bookstore and you look at the topics and you're excited about this topic. You want to devour 100 books on it, or you want to watch hours and hours and hours of video content on it because you want to learn. That's the thing that you're passionate about, right? And if you can do that, then you have your topic. Now what you have to do is figure out what the market, what people would be willing to pay for, right? And that just takes some experimenting. That takes a lot of interviewing potential customers, and it's called customer development, and also figuring out product market fit. Those are two really important terms in entrepreneurship. And so if you're thinking about going the entrepreneurship path, you want to understand those terms. There's a ton of resources online and lots of books that you can get to read them. But that would be, I would say, how I would think about starting.
Yeah.
And the one other thing I would add is going, or what I like to call going around the standard filter. And what I mean by that is if you do what everybody else is doing, you don't stand out in any way, and the outcome that's happening to everybody else will happen to you.
Right.
When you figure out how to go around that standard filter, it becomes options open to you. I can't tell you what those options are because you have to go through it first, right? But like we can use applying for a job as an example. If you send the HR representative your resume and you apply online, guess what? That's what 99.999% of everybody else is doing. Right. And so you're just one of everybody else. If you can figure out how to get more creative about getting your voice heard, I don't know, send them something in the mail, right? Who uses a post office anymore? But send them cookies or send them a shoe and say, hey, I'm just trying to get my foot in the door. Or figure out creative ways of going around what everybody else is doing, and people will pay attention. That takes some creativity and ingenuity on your side.
Yeah.
But we're lucky in that right now, you have some time.
Right.
Everyone's sitting at home trying to figure out what to do, right? So you've got a little bit of time and going, how could I have fun with this? How could I play with this and do something a little bit different without being like stocky or freaky or anything, right?
Yeah.
I get creative about my approach and do something a little different than everybody else is doing, and that will get you the attention. That's true of finding a job. It's true of finding an internship. It's true of starting a company. It's true of basically anything that you do.
Yeah.
Get creative.
That's so helpful. And man, in terms of just thinking creatively, really doing things differently, right? So you can have a different outcome than the 99% of people. And while entrepreneurship, I think that's great that you mentioned how entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. I think that's super important to understand. But one thing that we emphasize at Student Dream is that while not everyone is an entrepreneur, everybody can be an owner, right? And everyone has value to bring to a company. And I think just when we're looking at this new job market, one really has to keep in mind, what value can I bring to these new arenas and these companies that I'm looking to work for. And one of the things that Techstars that you guys are great at is just really building out, these industries of the future and trying to gather companies that are operating in those industries of the future. And so for the employment seeker who's listening to this, what are some industries that Techstar is really focused on right now that you guys are excited about, both in the short term, right, which is the next 6 months, 12 months, a year, or 2 years, and in the long term, when we think about, especially from an investor's perspective, the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because what we focus on is almost exclusively tech.
Yeah.
And so we don't do a lot of retail or mom and pop style businesses. It's all the companies that we work with have some sort of software or technology bend to them. And I would say as a whole, tech isn't a space, it's a horizontal, it's not a vertical. And what I mean by that is you can't just look at the tech space. In every business vertical, there is a technology angle, right? Every vertical, there is a technology angle. So like think about restaurants for a moment. 20 years ago, they were still writing down orders on paper pads. And now you see them using computers for that. And sometimes you see the servers carrying smartphones and taking orders on devices.
Mm-hmm.
And in the back office, they're using computers to process, and all of that is software. So software is impacting every vertical that exists. And so it's a hard question to answer because from our perspective, tech is growing.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you to think about the markets that are most interesting to you. Because again, like, it's really hard to live a happy, fulfilling life in a market that you hate. You will be unsuccessful if you wake up every day miserable. So the first thing you got to do is figure out, what do I love to do? What space do I love to play in? Do I want to work in? And do I want to build a career? By the way, if you don't know the answer to that, it's totally okay. Right?
That's good.
Your goal then is to figure out the answer to that by trying to get as many exposure to as many spaces as possible until you find one that you love. Right? I stumbled into mine. I really did. And so, but once you figured that out, I would say that the spaces that are most interesting to us are clearly anything that facilitates a remote or virtual experience. So, you know, we're on a Zoom call right now. Nice Zoom, right? Like, Zoom is absolutely exploding during these time periods. Clearly, if you're on the front lines of the healthcare space, but if you're on the back lines of the healthcare space right now, like elective surgeries and things like that, those areas are really struggling. So healthcare is an interesting space depending on where you're looking. Anything that is a virtual communication or virtual collaboration is obviously really, really interesting.
Right.
And I think when you step back and look at what COVID and quarantine is doing to the way that we live our lives, you can get kind of creative about where you want to spend your time. Like, I think that we're moving back to a world of much better one-to-one relationships.
Wow.
Right? I think that my prediction is that people have gotten overwhelmed by the number of people in their circles. And because of that, they're not building strong enough relationships with each individual person. And so that's creating a sense of loneliness and a sense of separation, right? And I think that this kind of dialogue, one-to-one, is gonna start to return, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So, but that's my hypothesis. So what's your hypothesis, right? What do you think that this kind of world is bringing to the forefront? Because that's where the opportunities lie. And you could be wrong. You're probably wrong. But that's how you stumble upon the thing that's right, is by testing out a bunch of stuff that's wrong and experiencing it, right?
Yeah, that's so good. Man, testing it out, really figuring out what space do I actually, again, want to operate in? Because whether it's something that's super high growth, if I don't like it, you know, success is inevitable, or failure is inevitable rather. So
it really is. You're going to not.
Yeah.
When you need to get up at 5:30 in the morning to be just a little bit better than everybody else, you're not going to do that for something that you hate.
Right.
Or something that fills you up. So,
right.
And like I said, it's okay to not know.
Mm-hmm.
What's not okay is not trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You got to try to figure it out, because otherwise you wake up and you're 40 or 50.
Yeah.
And you're miserable.
Right. And we don't want that here. One of our values at Student Dream is not just financial freedom, but professional freedom. You know, you're able to support yourself, your family, your community through work that you actually enjoy. All right. So you said something about, what was it? Let me remember. You said, it slipped my mind. Oh, okay. Yes. You asked us, you know, what do you think, right? You said, you know, about one-to-one communication. This is my hypothesis, but what do you think? And I believe that one of the most difficult things for people these days is to know their voice, right? And to really understand what they think and be okay with voicing that. I really think it takes practice and intention. But I think it's one of the most powerful things that folks can do, especially as a young person, when you have all these other voices competing for your mental space. And so can you kind of speak on just how you've been able to like find your voice, right? And really figure out, hey, here's what I think, you know?
I actually can. I remember the moment it happened. I was sitting in a room. I've been in the tech industry for a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
And up until very, very recently, it was a male predominant industry, right? I was usually the only woman in the room. And usually the men are always trying to talk over each other and let themselves be heard. And I remember very specifically being in a meeting, and I was with some of the most senior people in the space, and I was listening to them debate on what to do about a problem. Mm-hmm. And I had looked up to these people, thought they had all the answers, thought they knew what they were talking about. And I had this moment of realization that none of them had any clue what they were talking about. As I was listening to them talk, I was like, wow, they're totally bullshitting right now. And all they're doing is trying to win an argument and be right, be the right answer, rather than figure out what the truth is and what the right thing to do. They just wanted to win. They didn't want to be right. And and they're making it up. And when I really realized that, I was like, oh, I can do this.
Right.
I got it.
Wow.
I can do this. Right. And it was this beautiful moment where I realized that people, in most instances, are just trying. They're trying their hardest. But what I think as a young person you think is that you mistake the voice that you're hearing as truth or fact. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that it's not, it's opinion. And that your job as a young person then can be to synthesize those opinions. Well, first of all, understand the difference between a strongly held opinion stated as fact and actual fact. By the way, if you figure out how to do that, you will survive the fake news, everything that's going on right now.
Right.
So learn how to distinguish the strongly held opinion stated as fact from actual fact. And then learn how to synthesize that information into your own opinion. And then you can state your opinion, but please state it as an opinion so we cannot reinforce and replicate the current bad behavior of stating strongly held opinion as fact.
Right.
But like once you know that, you can find your voice, because you understand that the input that you're getting are just people's opinions. They're not facts. And most of the time, those opinions are based on not a lot.
Yeah.
Not much. And so you can very quickly become more of an expert in the topic by going out and doing your research and reading a bunch of books on it, and like finding experts who spent decades studying the stuff or learning about the stuff. You can go collect that information to help you form an opinion, rather than just listening to a bunch of adults yammer on about things that they don't actually know anything about.